Who's been at the keynote this morning? Who can relate with Denise talking about self-doubt, feelings on insufficiency? I just remembered the first time when I went to a conference. It's not that long ago. It's maybe 10 years ago. I went to a conference and I knew nobody. And I was standing there like, I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't know how to approach people. I had no idea how to talk to people. And today, just today at lunch, I took my food, my lunch, and I went to a place and there was nobody around that I knew. And I just sat there between people and there was no word coming out of my mouth. Because I'm having a hard time talking to people, especially people I don't know. But you're up there on stage, you say. Yes, I am, and it is scary, believe me. Because standing up here is like fighting against 2 million years of evolution. Who's a speaker? Who speaks in front of their team or in front of people during work sometimes? Many do. And it can be scary. It's fighting against millions of years of evolution. Because usually, when I'm standing alone in front of 20 or 100 or 500 people, it usually doesn't end well. That's how it worked in the past. And this is ingrained in our genes. This is ingrained in our psychology. But I changed that. I changed the way, or I'm changing, because today at lunch I realized I'm still doing the same things. I'm still having the same fears. But I changed things because I'm 45. 45 years old, maybe a little bit over the half of my year. And it's somewhat like this glass. Is it half full or is it half empty? A few years ago, I had an incident, a health-related incident, that led to me thinking about, where am I? Where am I in this life? Having crossed the middle of it. And I've been thinking about things that I did. I worked for a very, very well-known company, which makes a great name on the resume. I made a career. I made a lot of money. I had a family. I was married. I have 2 kids, a house, 2 cars. Everything that a successful person needs. And then I started asking myself, what is this thing called success anyway? And I Googled success. And I tried to turn down the white a little bit, so I hope it isn't too late. I Googled success, and I found that there's 1.18 billion entries in Google. And I looked for success on Amazon.com and found almost 300,000 entries. There seems to be a lot of people who are asking themselves about success, who want to learn about success, who want to know what it means to be successful. And there are even people being paid for telling other people how to be successful. Success trainers. People standing on stage just like I do, but they do the chakra thing. Maybe they don't. I've never been to such an event. However, I would like you to do something now. Don't worry, you don't have to get up, you don't have to touch each other or dance or whatnot. Imagine you're sitting in a car. Your own car, of course, because you're successful. Imagine you're sitting in a car. Please grab the steering wheel. Please do that. I can see that. Grab your steering wheel. Okay. Now, in your right hand, you have your smartphone and you're making a picture of your GPS. Yes? And now please make sure that everybody can see the $5,000 watch on your wrist. I'm sitting in my car like this all the time. Don't you? This person is a success trainer, a friend of mine, well, what you might call a friend on Facebook. He posted this. On a Sunday with the subtext saying, Sunday's the new Monday, I'm already en route to my next customer. And I didn't think of anything. I didn't see that watch. But then all of a sudden, the answers showed up with people posting, oh, that's a great taste in watches. Oh, I have that too. And then I got curious and I started to look it up. And on one of them, I was actually able to read the brand, and I started Googling it. They start at around $5,000, which is fine. I myself am wearing a somewhat expensive watch, having an old Apple Watch. I bought it. It's used. I got it from a colleague. But people can wear whatever they want. That's fine. It's fine with me. But why does he need to show off like this? If not to project an image to the world that he maybe doesn't really feel inside of himself? Is he not trying to show something to others by means of symbols, by means of status, by means of, I'm successful? What he's doing, he's telling a story. I'm telling a story. We all are telling stories. When we communicate with each other, it's always about stories. When you come home after this conference, when you talk about this conference, you're going to convey it in form of stories. And every time we communicate, we tell each other stories. But we also tell ourselves stories about ourselves. The most important stories are the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. Now imagine you're a child. You've just been born. And when you're hungry, you're getting fed. When you're cold, you're being comforted. Oh, I never can pronounce this word. Comforted. You're being held. You're being held, and you're when you're scared, somebody picks you up and takes care of you. A child in this age does not have a concept, can't grasp the concept of mother and father and things. A child in this age, for this child, it's just the universe taking care of the child. So it knows whenever I'm scared, someone will take care of me. Whenever I'm hungry, someone will take care of me. And all of a sudden, when the mother is making food or doesn't have the time and the baby cries, and the mother doesn't immediately come to pick it up, the child experiences panic because no one's there. But in the next minute, the mother comes and picks up the baby, and the baby feels safe. It feels safe again, and it learns that even when I'm alone sometimes, I'm not alone. Somebody's taking care of me. But then there's other childhoods. There's even this idea of raising children by letting them cry themselves into sleep. Because then they learn that they can't just cry and everybody runs. But a child at that age has no idea of this being a learning experience. It just experiences that nobody's coming. It experiences that it's in pain, and it's hungry, or it's cold, or it's tired, and it doesn't fall asleep. And sometimes somebody comes in, opens the door, yells, "Shut up now!" smashes the door closed again. And if that's all that you experience, you start thinking about, why is that? You start creating a story around this experience. If people don't take care of me, maybe it's because I'm too loud, I'm too much. Because not knowing why things happen is something which is very difficult for us people, for us human beings. We can withstand many things, but living in chaos is very, very, very scary. Which is why we invent stories of God, of somebody taking care of us. Which is why we invent stories of where people go when they die. Or why they die in the first place. Because chaos is scary. We need structure. We need something to grasp on, to hold on to. And this is stories. And maybe this child helps cope with the situation by telling itself stories about maybe I'm not worth being loved. or what I bought into, maybe I'm not good enough. I used to live with my mother until I was 12. My parents got separated very early in my life. I lived with my mother until I was 12, and then I moved to my father. And at my father's place, he had married again, and his new wife, she had 2 of her own kids, and then there were 2 more on the way. And I lived with this family, but it turned out that in her view, in her eyes, I'm not part of the family. So she started to push me away. And one of the, how can I say, manifestations of her pushing me away was, imagine I had my room with everything I needed, my bed, a desk to do my homework on, and in front of the room there was a small, maybe 1 square meter hall. To the right was a toilet with cold water, no heating. To the front was the door to the outside, the main door, main entrance door. And to the left, where the rest of the hall went, was a door, and this door was locked. And I was not allowed to enter the rest of the house because I'm not part of the family. My father sometimes let me in secretly when she was not there to pick up some food from the kitchen or to go take a shower. But usually, I wasn't able to get in there, and he gave me some money to buy some food for myself, but she shouldn't know. And at some point, I was just 18 years old. We lived on the French side, just near the border between France and Germany. I'm German, but my father bought a house on the other side, and we lived there. I went to school on the German side and had to travel back and forth. But there was no public transportation, so every morning, my father brought me to the nearest train station on the German side. I took the train to school, and at night I took the train back. And my father picked me up again, and we went back home. At one point, I was just 18. He came again. I went into the car, and he told me, "Dennis, I will bring you wherever you want, but you're not coming home again." Which is when she told him that I'm old enough now. And if Dennis doesn't leave, she will. But she will take the kids, the girls, the 2 girls that she had with my father. And this was a decision that he actually wasn't really able to make, but he still did. I've spoken with him about this in the recent years over and over again. Today, we're fine. Today, he says he kicked out the wrong person at that point in time. But back then, he kicked me out. So I tried to, get along with it because that's all I knew. I wasn't able to finish school because I lived in the streets. I pretty quickly ran out of friends whom I could sleep over at. So I had to work. I had to earn some money to just survive. I had to quit school. I never finished school. I never went to university. But still, I'm here. This is my story. It might be drastic. For many people, it probably isn't, but because many people experience much worse than I did. But it doesn't matter at all, because everyone has a story. All of us have a story that defines how we feel about ourselves, that defines what we think of ourselves. Me, I'm not good enough. Nobody wants me. Others may think I'm too fat, or I'm too thin, or I'm too small, or I'm too big, or I'm too lazy, or too stupid. I don't know. We tell ourselves stories about ourselves that are deeply ingrained. And eventually it all comes down to self-worth. How much do you think that you're worth? And in our society, which is very focused on certain things, in our society, self-worth is defined by our ability. And we prove our ability by our performance. That's why we have to perform. That's why we're being measured with how much money do you earn, how many kilograms do you weigh, what velocity do you produce, all kinds of metrics that value our performance. And we people, we human beings, take these numbers and apply them to ourselves because for some reason we think they project what we are worth. And why is that? Back in the past, a few 10,000 years back, we were small groups, much smaller than the people in this room. We were small groups, and let's say you're a hunter. As a hunter, you're big, you're strong, you're hungry, you eat a lot. And when you go hunting, maybe you're not so good at hunting. Maybe you lack the ability, so you bring home a strained foot, but nothing to eat. If this happens a couple of times, your tribe mates will at some point tell you to better stop eating for some time. And that's scary, because being kicked out of a group in the past, in the prehistoric past, usually meant death. So being kicked out of the group because you don't carry your weight is scary as hell, because it feels like you're about to die. And this is ingrained in our psyche, this feeling. We learned that we need to do things to be appreciated. We need to do things to be worth something. We need to do things to deserve love. That's what we believe. And we believe that if we don't do what we're supposed to do, that we're unworthy. And the feeling of being unworthy is like, inside of our psyche, it's like being threatened by death. And to not having to deal with all that all the time, our brain created a very, very great strategy, which is called procrastination. Of course, I didn't pass the exam. I started studying just the night before. Or of course, I didn't make that deal because I needed some information about the client, had to call a colleague. I tried to call him last night, he didn't pick up the phone. However, I knew that I was going to that client 2 weeks before, but I called just yesterday. Or I would do great work, but I'm not that well organized. I'm just unorganized. I actively create excuses for why I fail. I actively create situations for me to not being able to succeed. Because then, inside of myself, I have this other version of me, this hero who can do everything perfectly, the one I think I'm supposed to be, the one I think I should project for others to see. But actually, I don't live into it because I sabotage myself. Because what if I would have studied all year long and still didn't pass the exam? And everybody would see it. Then maybe it's true what they say. I'm not good enough. When I started working on this talk, I've been working on it inside my head for about a year because I wanted to talk about this. It's important to me. I wanted to talk about this, and I've been pondering it, and I've been talking to friends, but I never got around to actually doing this talk. And at some point in time, a friend of mine came to me and said, we do have a meetup in Berlin in Germany 2 weeks from now, and you're going to talk about this. You know, in the past, I used to do technical talks when I talked about other things. If people don't like it, it doesn't have anything to do with me. But now I'm supposed to talk about myself. This is scary. And I was sitting 2 days before the meetup, I was sitting in front of my computer working on the slides. Well, this is what my screen looked like. I was so scared. I was so scared of what would happen if people wouldn't like it. What would happen if people wouldn't show up or leave the room in the middle of me speaking. I was so scared of conveying myself because I have this story of myself not being good enough. But I still do. Because I want to talk about this. It's important to me. You know, each of us carries a mask. For some, it's very thin, a thin layer. For some, it's really thick, but everyone carries a mask because we want others to see us in a certain way. Like when you're meeting a potential romantic partner, you somewhat start listening to somewhat different music than you usually do. Maybe you start liking things that you usually don't like that much, but you're a little bit different because you hope that he or she likes you. Or when you apply for a job, of course, I'm creative, I'm well organized, I can work in teams, I can work on my own. All these contradictory things that are standard requirements in pretty much every job advert. I can do all these things, and I've got 25 years of experience, and I've worked with this, worked with that. I can learn it. I try to project an image for the employer to like me, to hire me. It's the other way around as well. So the employers tell you things that might not be entirely true as well. But that's how it works. And it's fine. It is fine wearing a mask. And it's sometimes leaning towards each other in the things we do, in the things that we like, in the things how we are. But when this mask is too thick, like it was in my case, I had an extremely fragmented relationship life in the past. Because every time I got close to a person, maybe 3, 4, 5 months into the relationship, I started, no, I'm not that relationship person. Maybe the two of us, that won't work. I had great reasons for breaking up, for quitting the relationship. Now, I know the reason, because I started panicking. What if she, after a few months, starts to see through my mask, starts to see who I really am? Myself thinking this person who I really am not being good enough. Then she would run away. Of course she would. Why would she stay? That's what I thought. And that's when I ran away. Before she could. Same thing with jobs. I started working somewhere. As soon as I dropped a ball, as soon as something happened, as soon as something that I did wasn't perfect, I started being scared. And once my boss looked funny, I almost immediately thought, oh, now I'm found out. I better quit. And that's when I quit. Went find a new job. So I ran away all the time, moved from city to city, moved from place to place. But one thing I could not run away from: my own negative self-talk, my own negative feelings. I was convinced, and Denise talked about this morning, I had what you call the imposter syndrome. I was convinced of the fact that I am an imposter because I never finished school. I never studied. All the people around me, they all studied. They're all perfect in what they do. I just get along by what I can do is talking. And that's what I thought. I sold myself too well. I got lucky again. But they're going to find out. And once they find out, I'm fucked. And it's not just me. It's very famous people who suffer from this. Meryl Streep once said she doesn't think she's a great actress. She just thinks she was lucky with the roles she got. Or Jodie Foster, after she got her first Academy Award, the Oscar, in an interview she said, I think they made a mistake. And I think they're going to find out and I'm afraid to have to give it back. Or Howard Schultz, the owner of the Starbucks chain, an empire. He's convinced that he is not a good manager at all. This whole thing will, at some point in time, will just fall apart. Or Mike Myers, who said, I'm still waiting for the talent police to knock on my door. Who knows the Mensa? Who ever thought about taking a test? Who actually did? Quite a few. I don't want the results. The Mensa is an organization by a specific IQ testing method of a very high IQ, intelligence quotient. To get into this organization, you have to take this test, and if you pass, you can join the organization. I didn't take the test because I was afraid of the result. There was a survey among members of Mensa, and 85% of them were convinced that if they would have to take the test again, they would fail, because they were just lucky with the questions. We, developers, all kinds of people, creative people, problem-solving people, troubleshooting people, we can't just build a table and see what we've done at the end of the day. We don't have a template and you do this and then you do that and then you do this and then it's finished, it's done. We can't knock on wood and feel what the result of our performance. We only see the money on the account at the end of the month. That's not enough for us. We don't feel our results. And on the other side, in our profession, we're getting at our limits all the time. How often have you sat there staring at a stack trace, having the feeling, I don't know why this doesn't work. I have no idea why this doesn't work. How often are you in a situation amongst people and there's a conflict and you don't get it, you can't resolve it. And you're sitting there and you're maybe responsible for the team. And you're sitting there and you're like, I have no idea how to deal with this. We get in this situation all the time, which is natural because we are problem solvers. We have to come up with solutions for things that nobody else has solved before, all the time. So all the time, we feel our boundaries, the boundaries of our ability. And they get wider all the time. But we feel ourselves, we always feel that we get stuck somewhere, which makes us feel like we don't know what we're doing. And at some point in time, 3 years ago, in September 2015, I sat I've been working in software consulting development. I've been working at a client with a colleague. She was fresh out of university, sitting right next to me, and we were working on Kubernetes. Anyone? Is it fun? For me, it wasn't, because I didn't understand what was happening. I have never worked with containers before. So I had no idea what I was doing. But right next to me sat a woman, a colleague, who was just fresh out of university, and she was just typing along. She knew everything, and I felt like, I'm supposed to know this, because I'm the one who's the high-paid person. I'm the one who's been doing this for many years. I'm supposed to know this, how it works, but I didn't. And all of a sudden, I started feeling like I would, like literally everything would now fall apart because I could not do my job. I felt like I cannot do my job. I don't deserve to be here. I'm not good enough. And now they will find out. And once they find out, I'll get fired. And once I get fired, I've lost my job. I won't find a new one because everybody will know And if I lose my job, if I don't get a new one, I'll lose my money, I'll lose my family, I'll lose everything. And all of a sudden, I saw myself back in the day when I was kicked out by my father, living in the streets with nothing. And I got so scared that I couldn't focus on the work anymore. And Denise, the photo is not so good, but Denise called it rumination. I call it the Doomsday Scenario. When I get scared, I think about the worst possible outcome. And I really thought that everything's going to fall apart. And this idea started turning inside my head, and I couldn't focus on work anymore. And because I couldn't focus on work anymore, I got even more scared because I wasn't able to do my work. And this vicious circle went quicker and quicker, and all of a sudden I found myself in the hospital, in the emergency room, having broken down. What I now know is that I got something called a panic attack. But talking to the psychiatrist, because that's where they sent me from the emergency room, when I talked to the psychiatrist, she listened to me for some time, and she listened, and at some point in time she said, what you have, I can do that sound too, what you have is probably a depression. Why? I'm not sad. I don't cry. Yes, but when was the last time that you were really happy about something? That made me think. I was thinking like, well, when my children were born. You're supposed to be happy then, right? But I'm not that kind of, I'm not a really emotional person. Okay, not really emotional. Do you get angry sometimes? Yeah, I can get angry. And then we talked a little more, and I realized, the more we talked, the more I realized that I can't really be happy. Because I can't really celebrate, as Denise said this morning, I can't really celebrate successes. Whenever something went well, it was like, oh, I was so lucky that it didn't blast into my face. I wrote a book 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, co-author with 2 other people. We published the book. It went really well back in the day. And then we celebrated. Well, the other 2 celebrated. I was just sitting there. And they were like, Dennis, be happy. Why aren't you happy? I don't know. I was just happy that I was lucky and nobody knew the crap that I wrote, and we had a good editor. So hopefully nobody knows that I can't write and I don't know what I'm talking about. That's what I thought. So I can't celebrate my successes, even when people come to me, which is so important. Even when people come to me and tell me they like me, when they tell me they appreciate me, when they tell me they love me, it didn't really work, because I knew you only like the mask. You don't know how I really am. So the positive feedback that I needed didn't come through. The negative feedback came through all the way, all the time. But the positive feedback didn't come through. So the doctor listened to me for another hour, and then she said, you know what we call this? A depression. So I've been suffering from depression for, I don't know, 10, 20 years without being diagnosed, without being treated. And I didn't know about it. And since I didn't know about it, I just realized that something's wrong with me. I have to be better. I have to perform. Nobody can see that I'm weak. Nobody can see that I'm scared. So I tried, and I tried harder, and I tried harder. And at some point in time, my body just said, I'm done. I'm done. And that's when I went through therapy. That's when I started to understand so many things in my life. And that's when I started to change so many things in my life. To not try to be someone who I am not, but to be myself. And this is why I stand up here. Because now I am myself, and I am scared. Believe me, I am scared. But it's important to me. And that's what counts. All these stories that I've told have something in common. Me being kicked out, or at home not being good enough. And my stepmother, she told me, I don't want to treat you like this. You make me do it. If you were different, I wouldn't have to. And I tried to be different. But it didn't work. It wasn't good enough. Me procrastinating because I have this idea of everything that I do needs to be perfect. Because otherwise people will judge me. Or the fact that I was not able to cope with me not knowing something. Comes down to something that's called perfectionism. And when I talk about perfectionism, I'm not talking about this non-weakness that you use when you apply for a job, like when they ask you, what's your weakness? Well, I'm a perfectionist, because it's a good thing, isn't it? It really is not. Because when you're a perfectionist, you have so high standards that you apply to yourself that you can't reach them. The good variant is conscientiousness. Help me, Heather. Conscientious. There's a good variant where you really, as Denise said that this morning as well, where you really care about things and about things being good enough. But it does not need to be perfect. And once I learned about me being a perfectionist in a really bad way, I started creating a small system for myself, a few questions that I ask myself whenever I get in a situation where I don't know, or where I'm scared, or where I feel that I'm building up that mask again. I start asking myself, whose voice is it in my head? Is it your voice in your head, or is it the voice of your grandfather telling you that as a boy you don't cry, you're not supposed to show your feelings? Is it your voice? Or is it the voice of your stepmother who told you that you're not part of the family? Or the voice of your teacher who told you that you're not worth the money being put into your education? Or the voice of your friends telling you that you want to quit smoking? And once you know whose voice is talking to you, what if it wasn't there? What would you say? What would you say? And very often I tell myself, I would like to do this. I would like to try something. The voice tells me, no, don't even try, you're going to fail. But I would like to. And then, what's the worst thing that could happen? Realistically. Not that doomsday scenario, but the worst thing, realistically, that could happen. Most of the time, we're not going to die when we fail. And then, what if you succeed? What if you succeed? And in the beginning, I had this question, what is success? I think this is a great definition. Success is never having to say, I wish I had. And maybe it's not about this half full or half empty glass. Maybe that's the wrong question. What if we have a new glass every day? What if we don't have to keep the stale, old water from 20, 30, 40 years ago? And keep it, the old stories, tell the old stories over and over again. What if we can pour fresh water into the glass every day? Our own water, our own stories. Why does it need to be water? You can drink whatever you want. Other people don't necessarily need to like it. It's fine if you like beer and you like wine. You can be friends, you can still be friends. Well, not while drinking, but you could. I would like to invite you to a small experiment. Think about one thing that you always wanted to do but never did. It could be a small things like, I don't know, starting a podcast, maybe a big thing, writing a book, quitting that job, starting something new, maybe telling somebody that you love them. What is that one thing that you always wanted to do, but never did? And now ask yourselves, whose voice is it in your head, preventing you from doing it, preventing you from trying? Who's talking inside of your head, telling you that you're not good enough, that you shouldn't even try? And if that voice wasn't there, what would you say? And what's the worst thing that can happen? You're probably not going to die. What if you succeed? What if it works? And if it does, tell me about it. Let me know. Thank you very much.